Hi, I'm Jan Waldman from Entertainment Plus, and today we're with Max and DL Kaulbachs. Welcome, Max and DL.
Nice to see you.
An important place to start would be with Max. And where are you from originally?
I'm from the Dutch East Indies, Indonesia now. I was born on the island of Java in the city of Surabaya.
I did not know that.
A long time ago, yeah. Only lived there for about 3 years. Don't remember anything of it. And then moved to Holland, of course, was the colonial power in charge of East Indies at that time, in the 30s. And I lived in Holland from 34 until 55, went to grammar school, went to the gymnasium there, and went to medical school in Leiden for several years, until one day we found out, a bunch of friends of mine, that you could do an internship in the United States. It would be paid for, transportation was free, a one-year deal, and we were all too eager to see this strange new foreign country that we had really never heard of. And at that time, little was known about the United States because we had no television, and everything came from the news. So in 1955, 4 of us went to Brooklyn, New York, and had a one-year wonderful experience. We learned, improved on our English. We got to know New York City. We got to know a good deal of medicine. And of course, in our free time, we had a lot of fun.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did.
Yes.
Well, I'm just going to switch over to DL for a minute. Now, DL, where are you from originally?
I was born in Brooklyn. I was in nursing school when we met, and I was in my senior year. And of course, these 4 tall, good-looking Dutch fellows were very impressive to the student nurses. And in fact, they would do all sorts of interesting things. They could, of course, they were all speaking Dutch, and nobody else there knew what they were saying, so they could sit next to girls and say, "Oh,
We
isn't
abused our
she
privilege."
awful?" And you know, all sorts of terrible things. So, so we met, and should I tell exactly how we met?
I think
No.
I would love to know.
Oh, shit.
I don't know if Max would like you to say it, but I would.
No, you go ahead.
You know what a Foley catheter is? Okay. There were certain procedures that we as students were not allowed to do, so you had to call the intern. And so, of course, he was there. I was working on a women's surgical floor. And so I said, "Dr. Kaulbachs, would you please do this procedure?" And so he, "Oh, of course, of course." So nurses always did everything in preparation. And so I had it all set up, and he comes to the patient, and he kept making a mess. And he was contaminating the area because he knew nothing about what we call septic technique. So I realized he didn't know what he was doing. So I sort of talked him through, and then finally he finished and left the patient. And I looked at the patient and I said, "You know, he's from another country and they do things differently."
That was a very good save on your part.
So
Yeah.
that was I think that was the very first encounter I had with you. So
Lasting impression, yeah.
Well, she saved you, so
yeah,
rescued you.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So then, now that's just the first date or the first meeting over the Foley catheter, but what's next?
Well, actually, I graduated and I worked in the emergency room of the same hospital, which was a lot of fun. He happened to be going through rotation. Rotation is when you do something in a different department every month. I think things
Like pediatrics or,
Yeah, OB.
cardiology or obstetrics.
So there he was. So we sort of got to work with
We
each other.
started to, yeah.
Yeah, and
After 1 year, the other 3 guys went back.
Okay.
One of them had already married one of the nurses. And
from my class.
We 2 had decided that, well, it was a little too soon to think about it, but why don't I just stay another year? So I stayed another year and did internal medicine, and at the end of that year, we got married in Beverly.
Well, I need to know how you proposed.
How did I propose? Well, DL can say that better because, again, there was a bit of a language barrier. Well, it was not so much
Phrasing.
It was just
Oh.
the proper phrases weren't quite there. So what did I say to you, DL?
Will you marry with, no, will you marry with me? Because the Dutch version would be,
Yeah,
will
would
you
have the
with
with
me
in it.
marry?
Yeah.
Oh, that's very sweet. I
Yeah.
like that.
But she understood it well enough.
Did she? So she said yes, clearly.
She definitely said
Clearly
yes. There was
said
no doubt
yes.
about it. Yeah.
So how much longer were you in Brooklyn? You're still in Brooklyn at this point, correct?
Yeah, we were there for 2 years. I was there for 2 years. And we got married on June the 30th, 57. And 3 or 4 days later, we were on the Maasdam to go to Europe. Because I hadn't quite finished my studies in Holland. So I wanted to be sure that whatever we were going to do, whether we were going to stay in America or stay in Holland, I wanted to have my Dutch license.
Oh, good. That was
Fu-
smart.
Right. So we went, had our honeymoon on the Maasdam and in Paris, which
Nice.
was quite nice. And then we came to Holland in The Hague, where my parents lived, and actually for the next 16 months, we lived in my parents' home, upstairs without any serious problems. I want to say that because
That's
people will tell
impressive.
you, don't never stay with your in-laws.
In-laws, right.
But we had no money. It's very simple. And an internship in Holland did not pay any money. So, yeah.
What did you do during this time?
I couldn't work as a nurse,
Right.
number one, because I didn't know any Dutch when we first got there. Secondly, the level of nursing was more like a nurse's aide. And then also, I would have had to live in the hospital. And as a bride, I didn't want to do that. Before we went, I had written to a number of American companies, thinking, well, maybe I could just work in the office
Oh, right.
typing or something. And this is, of course, all before computers. So I did get a job at this international institute called the Institute of Social Studies, and it was all foreign students, and the working language was English. So of course I was the pro.
You were the pro. That's great.
What was interesting, there was a woman there, an English woman who was also married to a Dutch fellow. And later on we got this other woman who was an Australian married to a Dutch. So we put a sign on the outside of our office, English-speaking union. So we corrected the papers of the students and the professors. And they even had this special machine, typewriter, made for me because it had all these different symbols. I would have to do all sorts of symbols in the typing. So my 1 year of typing in high school
Paid off.
paid off.
Big
yeah.
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing. That's great.
Yeah.
So now
where do you go
my,
next?
my wife, being as broad-minded as she is, was seriously considering settling in Holland if I had a particularly good job offer. So I applied for residency in medicine, both in the States and in Holland, and I got 2 approvals in Holland, except they said, well, we can't really take you on until 2 years from now.
Oh.
But you'll be in the army anyway. So I also applied in Rhode Island and Vermont and New Hampshire, and they said you can come right away. Actually, one of them wanted us to come personally to present ourselves, but we turned that down. So I ended up at Dartmouth.
Nice.
Which is very nice. And I finished my internal medicine there.
Okay.
And at the end of our stay there, which was from, I think, 58 to 61, we had our first baby.
Oh, nice.
That was Emily. Then in 61, after finishing that, my father was rather ill with heart disease. And I was the only child, and I felt compelled to try to get a little closer to her. So I said, how can we spend some more time in Europe before it's too late? And so I contacted the recruiting officer at Washington, D.C., and he said, if you enter the Army now, you have more than 50% chance to be stationed in either Germany, France, or Italy.
And working as a physician.
As a physician, yes, exactly. So we did that, and I was stationed originally in France, near Bordeaux, and we were very excited about that.
Very nice.
Because
Very
we
nice.
love France. And then de Gaulle decided in 61 to get out of NATO. And so all the American troops were gone. and I was reassigned to Germany, which was also very nice. And so we stayed there for 3 years and had 2 more children.
Yes.
And I became American citizen in '62. The Army allowed me to fly back to New Hampshire to take the oath. All that.
Because that was his last residence.
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect.
So now we're in '64, and I have had internal medicine. I'm board certified. I've had some practice in the Army, and now the question was, what are we going to do? And I said to DL, I said, you know, I really want to be a cardiologist. No, I was already about 30 years old, and DL said, gee, really?
And 3 kids, right?
3 kids,
Right.
yeah.
So instead of that, we eventually DL said, okay, see what you can do. I applied to a number of places, including Barnes Hospital, and, but then I spoke to a Dutchman who was second in command at the Children's Hospital in Boston, Paul Jugenholz, and he said, come over, would you like to be a fellow in congenital heart disease? And I said, you know, I'm an internist, not a pediatrician, but it's very attractive. And to be in Boston, so I took a year at the Children's Hospital. And then after that, I was lucky enough to get it to the General for
Mass
another
General.
year there.
That's how you got to Mass General, because I knew you were at Mass General.
Yeah, that's where I got my adult training. And then I had to be honest, I said, yeah, we're going to settle down now, you know.
I mean it this
getting
time.
too late, yeah.
Yeah.
So
3
then I
children.
looked up to Salem, and Salem seemed to be attractive because it had a special procedure room and a cardiac cath lab in the making, and so we settled. And from '66 until '98, I practiced at Salem Hospital.
Okay.
And you were home with 3 children, and then another came up
And then
in
another
'68.
came, probably came a little later, right?
'68,
Yeah.
right.
Now you're working at Salem. You didn't stay idle.
I went back to school in the 70s
Oh,
because when you're a nurse doing what they call a diploma school, that's 3 years, very concentrated sciences, but all your liberal arts are totally missing, and I felt this need. So actually I started at Salem State, and I went for a whole year.
With 4 children at this point?
No, I
Just
was
at
not
3.
yet. I still had
Still
3.
3, but still.
But I was,
But still, right.
but I was, so every semester I would take a different course, and then we wanted to have another son because we had a boy and 2 girls. I took a course in, I think it was World Literature 1, and I purposely, you know, had gotten pregnant, and this fellow said to me, oh, are you coming back for World Literature 2? And I said, no, I'm going to have a baby. So anyway, a few years later,
I didn't expect that answer.
no, I think he thought I was not about to do that. I did go back to school in Boston and for 3 years. And as my son, our oldest son, said to me, he was in high school, he said, Mom, why do you go to school? You don't have to.
that's
So,
not the reason.
so I did that for 3 years. But I've always been involved in kids, whatever they were doing, you know, all sorts of school things. I was on the Principals Advisory Committee, I was on
so you
music,
were
theory,
very
all
involved.
these things. And I didn't start or go back to painting until probably 80s. When I was in high school, we had a very strong art program in my school, and they wanted me to go further. And I said, well, you know, I'm going to be a nurse. So I had it in the back of my mind, and so then I started painting more. But I've always been involved in a lot of things, and if you said to me today, what is your passion? I would probably say environmental things.
Really?
I'm really hung up on all this type of stuff. I'm on the town recycling committee. I'm chairman of the environmental
Currently?
committee. Yeah, of my
Good.
garden club. There's a new organization, I'll put a plug in.
Yes,
called
please do.
Sustainable Marblehead, and we have various action groups, and so I'm on the preservation, conservation section.
Yeah, it's all good causes.
Yeah.
We're going to get back to your art in a little bit, but now, Max, you came to Salem, and a lot of exciting things happened once you got there. You really got the ball rolling for cardiology.
Well, it was actually not as difficult as it seems, because I basically was following the trend of cardiology.
Okay.
Cardiology certainly made a tremendous rise in knowledge, and I took
And
advantage
procedures.
of it. And procedures. We started off setting up a coronary care unit, to monitor the patient's heart rate, and that was very helpful and successful. And the only place that had it at the time was the Brigham, and so we were right there at the very beginning. And we modernized the lab. We had a pacemaker clinic for the pacemakers we put in, so we could follow the patients. All these things happened the first few years. I had a senior partner, not official partner, but a senior cardiologist, Dr. Henry Stebbins, who was very supportive of me at the time. So over the first several years, a lot happened. We had a lab, and then in 1970, Dr. Stebbins retired, and Larry Finkelstein, Dr. Finkelstein became my first partner. And that was actually the beginning of North Shore Cardiology Associates, the two of us. And he brought with him from the West Roxbury VA Hospital the technique of coronary angiography.
Okay.
And then 2 years later, Dr. John Santos joined us, and he also brought the latest in coronary angiography. So we had an active coronary angiogram laboratory. Previously, for previous 4 years, we just did valves. We measured valves and then decided whether or not the person needed surgery.
Because that's all that was available, right?
That was the only thing that was
They could
available.
do.
So by mid-70s, we were quite active, and we were actually only modern, up-to-date cardiac cath lab in north of Boston. And then in 76, echocardiography became increasingly popular, and Dr. Chester Clark joined us. And he was very well trained in echocardiography. He had co-authored some major papers about some typical heart disease entities. So it really rounded us up between the four of us. And we just had a wonderful, active and successful cardiac group. 1980, after several years trying, we got a outpatient cardiac rehabilitation unit, which of course now everybody has, but at the time it was very unusual. And then about 5 years later, Dr. Clark organized a preventive cardiac program.
Which is also new.
Which is also new at the time. Nobody
Right,
heard
no
about
one
it.
was doing
And now
that.
everybody is doing it.
Right.
It was a very wonderful time for all of us because, yeah, we were up ahead of most people, but at the same time we were following a trend, a nationwide trend. So in 1990, Larry Finkelstein retired, and Dr. Santos took a leave of absence. And in 1992, Dr. Clark went back to Washington,
Right.
D.C. So we had a complete turnover with Dr. Waldman, Anderson, and then later on Dr. Kemper.
Dr. Kemper, right, yes.
We had some very, very good people. What I always liked, I was told by Dr. Nadis back at Children's Hospital years ago, he said, Max, whatever you do, he said, surround yourself with good people.
Yes.
And that's what I did. I surrounded myself with
Any
very
great
good
leader
people.
knows that.
Yeah. Well,
And you were a great leader. You are a great leader.
Yeah, well, thank you. So in 1998, I retired. And then, of course, within 3 years, the two cardiology groups that were sort of competitive, CPI and NSCA, merged because now we had open heart surgery
Right.
and angioplasty. And of course we had Dr. Waldman and Dr. Roberts doing the angioplasties. And so we had a full service. It was wonderful. And of course, you know, probably the most recent news is that as of 2050, we had to close our cardiac surgery
Right.
program, not because of quality problems, but simply for some financial problems that we weren't making enough money for partners.
Right. Sad.
That was
but true.
sad,
Yes,
very
it was a
sad.
sad time.
That
I
was very
will
sad.
say that was very
Very
sad.
sad, yes.
I'm going to switch back to DL for a second. Now, your art, when you obviously have been painting and in the medium forever, what's your favorite type of art? I mean, oils, watercolors?
Actually, I like oils and watercolors equally.
Both,
I go back and forth. A few years ago, I did pastels. I learned to do pastels, so that's another thing. And most recently, we had a workshop on this very unusual medium called alcohol ink, where you drop colors on this very slippery paper,
Okay.
and you have different tricks. You blow it with a straw, or you use a Q-tip, or
Sounds
you
like
do all.
fun.
It is fun, but the idea is you can create what you want. So I did put something together that was sort of fun, and I'm interpreting that too. Another thing, well, of course, I love to go to museums every time we travel, and
Oh, and
look
you're a
at there
docent, aren't you?
Yeah, I've been a docent at the PBD Essex since 1992. So
In
it's
Salem, yes.
25 years, and I've seen a lot of growth.
Oh, that is a marvelous museum.
Yeah, it
Marvelous.
is.
It has grown into a beautiful museum. Now, have you had any art openings yourself? Did you have any exhibits?
Oh, sure. Actually, I have a friend who uses her name is also initials. She's JP.
Oh.
And so we've had, I think,
JP and DL.
5 shows together. We
That's
call it the initial,
Initial show.
The initial show. I like
yeah.
that.
Yeah,
I
5
like
the
that.
5th initial show. No,
that's good.
because she's a traditional painter and I am too. So
Oh, that's great. And what do you paint mostly?
I like landscapes, seascapes, streetscapes,
Okay.
still life, anything like that. So
Uh-huh.
I love sunsets and sunrises. What's interesting, here we see sunsets. Our daughter, who lives downtown, sees sunrises when she's running. So she sends me pictures of sunrises
Nice.
that I can paint.
Well, I'd like to go back to Max, and you need to tell us about soccer and how you were involved in bringing soccer to the North Shore.
Well, everywhere outside the United States, soccer is
Big.
the sport to play for anybody. And so in Holland, I grew up during the war, and shortly thereafter, I became a member of a soccer club. And I played soccer at a relatively high level for a while. And then I came to the States, and there was no soccer. In fact, I remember I was a soccer doctor for Dartmouth while I was at Hanover. It was just sad. I mean, I had no idea what the game
What
was
they were
like.
doing.
And then I came to Marblehead, and the soccer field, instead of having a rectangle for the penalty area, it had a semicircle. So, they really had no interest.
And no idea.
No. And so I missed soccer from 58 until 76. And in 76, I told Yael, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And she said, yeah, you always say you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And it never comes anything of it. But this time she and I set up or developed a program with a third person that actually lives in New Hampshire right now. I haven't seen in a long time. And started youth soccer. There was a program in Linfield, there was a program in Topsfield, and most of it was west of Boston, but it was very limited here. And so just last year, we celebrated 40-year existence.
That's right.
So I was active on the administrative level. I coached for many years. Altogether, it was a wonderful experience. Well, now you see the game is becoming more popular.
It's huge.
So we were part of that, and the kids have played soccer. My grandchildren, by the way, only one of them out of 10 plays soccer.
Well, now,
But,
yeah.
but they do other things. They run and
I know
play
you,
tennis and so on.
Yeah,
and so
I
forth.
know, but it's kind of
But,
funny.
yeah.
Soccer is so popular, especially when my kids were younger. It was just the sport to play, and my kids played Marblehead soccer because they
Good.
went to
Yeah.
Marblehead School. And at the time, I didn't know that you were instrumental in getting it going. And,
Yeah.
and when I found out, I thought, oh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, we did start it.
pretty nice
sure.
because it
And-
was huge. Really.
And I continued to play in the veteran level until I was 57. Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
At one time, I think this was the peak of the whole period of time, we had 47 teams.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And a town of less than 20,000 people.
Yeah.
47 teams.
That's impressive.
Each team would have the coach, an assistant coach, a team mother, then you'd have all the parents. The whole town was mobilized. If we had to do all over again, we would never have started with older kids. We would have started with little kids. When you have little kids, you get the parents. So there would be at the
When you're
first,
older kids and you become the babysitter.
Yes. Yeah.
but the first season, we would each, I always had a station wagon. We'd borrow a station wagon. We'd each have half a team because the parents were not coming along. We'd be driving all over the place, all these other towns, half a team each. So
Yeah.
it was.
That was a commitment, but you are, and didn't you receive you've received recognition for this, I
Oh,
know.
yeah.
Oh yeah, I know. I do know that. So, but that's good. I'm glad you have because there are things that can be forgotten so easily.
And it was a
It's
labor of
important.
love.
Yes.
Certainly for me. I don't know for you.
Well, it took a lot of time,
Yeah, it took a
and
lot,
I
yeah.
was the registrar and the vice president and the publicity person, and what else did I
Yeah,
do?
in the
Oh,
beginning.
and you raised 4 children, but other than
Oh,
that.
and the
Right.
fundraiser, I got
All
20,000.
4 kids played soccer.
Yeah.
They did. Oh, your
Like
children
it or
played.
not.
Right. I think they had to.
But both boys played varsity soccer. They were quite good. And Helen, who played soccer in high school, decided to play rugby when she went to Williams.
That's a tough
Itty
sport.
bitty of a girl, 115 pounds.
Right.
And
Right.
she played that, and Emily played soccer too, I think. Yeah.
But you do have a daughter who followed in your footsteps.
Yes, indeed.
Another Dr. Kaulbach.
Yes, Helen actually, what's interesting about that is that the month that I retired, 1998, she started.
Right.
So the name did not disappear.
No, that's nice.
Yeah, she wanted to become a doctor from the very beginning. She went to University of Virginia Medical School and Georgetown for medicine, and then a BI for endocrinology. And Robbie, our youngest, eventually decided to become a physical therapist. And so he has an office here on Route 114. He's a manager of a clinic. He's doing a wonderful job. And
Yes.
what's interesting about that is that when I was young, physical therapy was barely noticed.
Right, and now it is
Nobody.
so important.
Right, and now
Every pre-surgical,
Exactly. It
pre-surgical,
has-
post-surgical.
it has become very important.
It has. It makes all the difference in the recovery.
Yeah.
Going into surgery and coming out of surgery.
Yeah,
The post.
exactly.
It really has made a huge difference.
So the other two,
What did the other two do?
well, Freddie is an architect in Philadelphia. He went to UPenn for his architecture.
Oh, nice.
And his wife is an architect too. They do wonderful work in Philadelphia. And Emily went eventually to Wharton,
Nice.
and then she worked,
Business school, right?
Yeah.
and then she worked for a consulting company called
McKinsey in New York. McKinsey.
McKinsey. Yeah.
New York.
Now, of course, she was smart enough to reduce her work time so that she could take care of the kids. And she would only work from 9 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the kids were at school.
Oh, that's good. That's great.
Part-time.
Well, it appears that the fact that they were in station wagons for large periods of time did not affect their future outcomes.
No,
Yeah,
no.
without seatbelts.
Oh,
without seatbelts, exactly.
yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've had a wonderful, wonderful life, and still have a wonderful
Yes,
life.
and
so.
you've traveled extensively
We-
after
oh,
you
yeah,
retired.
God, you
So
reached-
tell us some of the
During,
countries.
during,
Oh, during too.
oh, a long time. Yeah, we
You
started.
you
in
always traveled, right?
yeah. Well, we had to go to Holland, of course.
Well, right. Did you still have any family there when the kids were a little older? Had your parents passed?
I think my parents were still alive when the oldest kid was 3 years old.
Oh, okay.
Only your mother got to see
So my
Rob.
mother,
Yeah.
my parents died in the 60s and early 70s, and I have no brothers and sisters.
But
We
you
did
would-
travel in our 50s and 60s and 70s, and now we will travel much less. But we've been in China. We went to China with the American College of Cardiology. That was
Nice.
wonderful. We went to Indonesia, which of course for me was important because I was born there.
Right, right.
No, not too many people go to Indonesia. I
No.
would like to put in a plug. It's a wonderful country to visit.
Okay.
It's the largest Muslim country in the world, but they are very moderate. You don't hear much about extremism there. We were in Hong Kong. We were in Thailand when our son was there for a year with his wife.
She had a scholarship.
Nice.
We've been all over Europe because that's where I'm from, so
Right.
we've been back there many times. And what else still we've been to?
Russia,
Oh, Russia,
Egypt.
yes. Oh, yes.
Ecuador, the Galapagos.
If we were to do it again, we missed out on Africa, other than Egypt. So
But it
yeah,
sounds like
we've
you hit a
traveled-
lot of the hot spots, though,
We've had a lot of fun and
and a
seen
good
the
life,
world.
and
Yeah.
a good team. You know, that really comes through. That you two were
yes.
a team, and I think you guys did a really good job.
DL calls it to stay married and go 60 years or more as we are. You need luck and pluck.
A lot of luck.
Not bad,
I think you're right. You have to stay healthy,
Yeah.
for one, and
but pluck
That
too.
was a lot
you
of
know,
luck.
yeah, a lot of luck, and then the pluck is what
Pluck
makes
is-
you stay together and
Yeah.
just fight through it. And yeah, that's true. Well, it has been a delight to talk with you two today, and I want to thank you for allowing me to come here and just to discuss your life and your journey. And I think you two are quite inspirational, and that was the reason I wanted to do this today. So
Thank you so much.
thank you, Max. Thank you,
Thank you.
DL.
Thank you very,
and
very much.
thank you from Entertainment Plus, and find us on Facebook.